Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi,
Hi.
John.
Hi, great to see you.
See you as well. Great to see you as well.
Hey, Demetrius.
Hey.
Hi, thanks so much for being on today. I am going to act as your moderator, and I know that folks will be joining as we go along here. As everyone should know by now, if you have questions, of course, post those to the comments, and we'll be taking a look at those to keep up and make sure they get answered. So I think let's start with something simple. If you could each just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Start with nice pullover, Demetrius. When can I get one? I love it. Well, hey guys, how are you? It's wonderful to have you guys over here. I'm Kelly Vonnier. I'm currently an EIR at Amplify. So just a short word for saying I work with founders. I've been a founder before. My first company was Millhaven. It got acquired in 2019. And since then, I've been working relentlessly to help Black founders succeed, either through the Amplify EIR program or Protege, which is a project I've been working on for the last year and a half. So yeah, just love helping founders kick it, or kill it, really.
Awesome. Hey everybody, Demetrius Gray, founder and CEO of Captain, which most folks have not heard of yet, and co-founder of WeatherCheck simultaneously. And so I'm a startup founder here in Louisville, Kentucky, and all the fun stuff of being a founder. Jesus.
So we're debuting your brand announcement here for the first time?
So technically, like, the company is still very much so in stealth, but I can tell you that the company name is Captain, and that's the story I'm sticking with for now.
Great. What a privilege. Well, I can't wait to hear more about that, of course, but let's kind of dive into some of the topic today around accelerators. I know, you both have so much experience in what it takes to get into the accelerator, all of the steps involved once you are in, and then post accelerator. So we're going to kind of touch on each of those. Kiana Baker, who is the Director of Community Engagement for Amplify Louisville, she has done such a great job putting together some questions, and I'm just going to help deliver those, and we'll just kind of have some back and forth and keep it casual. One of the things that I think would be super helpful to know first off is just, each of you tell me, what accelerators have you been in, both nationally and locally? And if you don't want to name them, just maybe tell us the number of accelerators that you've been a part of.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I've been, I think I'll go. I've attended, I think, 3 of them. Vote Awards in Louisville, which I think a bunch of us in the city have attended. And it's you have to at least look out for that one or apply for that one, right? And I attended Highway 1, which was a hardware accelerator in San Francisco. And after that, 500 startups in San Francisco as well. So I think 3 of them, and then involved with RTBI's incubator as a coach or working with the coaches over there. So yeah, so I'd say 3.
Yeah,
attended 3.
Yeah, I think I was like, I think I went to like 5. So
oh yeah, that's true.
Vote was the one. Singularity University, which was the Erie Innovation Accelerator. BCP Tech out of Kansas City, Queen City FinTech out of Charlotte, and then the one that everybody obviously knows is Y Combinator in San Francisco. And so, and then Rise in Virginia Beach. So there were 6 accelerators. So yeah,
it slipped my mind that I'm over here thinking a couple few ones, and now I remember
a lot of them.
That is a lot. What would you say, Demetrius, having been a part of locally and not locally, what would your advice be to folks? Like, how did you find out about the ones that weren't here locally? And what would you say the experience was like between local and national?
Well, I mean, they sort of run the gamut, right? It's like in terms of nascency, like, when the program started, I believe we were the first class of the Erie Innovation Accelerator. But, like in a lot of those cases, we went to those accelerators for different reasons, right? Sometimes it was because there was a brand or a customer that was associated with the accelerator. Sometimes it was because, we were trying to do something with relation to fundraising. And so Erie was a good example of a scenario where it really wasn't about the money, it was about the customer. We were trying to acquire our first insurance carrier customer at WeatherCheck, and Erie Insurance was there in Erie, Pennsylvania, and it happened to be one of the only top 10 insurance companies that was in a small town. And so it's like, oh, our bet was that we could use the accelerator to sort of get to our customer easier. Turns out that was true. And so they became our largest customer in the early days by attending that accelerator. Y Combinator, completely different reason, right? Like we're sort of actively trying to raise money, and that's why that accelerator was helpful. And so those are the sort of nuances. I think that the biggest difference is like approach, like what the accelerator exists to do for the startup. And, so that's why we went to so many.
No, I think that's really smart. Having a plan in place before you get involved with accelerators, because if you get accepted, and it's a big commitment, right? To go through the process. It takes you sometimes away from your business a little bit, in a good way, but it certainly is, additional work to be a part of the accelerator. Kella, can you speak to what it's like to actually experience that? Do you agree that that's true? That was my experience. Was that it can sometimes take you, pull you into all of the work that is involved in the accelerator, and just tell me a little bit about your opinion on that.
And like you probably like pull you away from your work, or at least away from like what the day-to-day of your startup activities are. Yeah, so I mean, it's like you have to make it work, right? Like you have to find a way to make it work. There are things that you're doing in the accelerator that a lot of them are like, hey, we think you need to do this, and it's going to help your company. And while most are right, like there are different levels of accelerator and different levels of expertise. This is why I tell everyone, I say, you want to know how it works for you, right? Like you want to know how to work for you. You don't have to attend everything, right? Like most accelerator, they have different programming. And if you think you have to attend so much all the programming, what happens is that you forget your company or things that you have to do. At the end of the day, you have to hit your traction, whatever goals that you have, your metrics, you have to hit that. And during that 3 months or 4 months of your accelerator, there has to be some form of traction, because at the end, you're either raising money if it's one of the accelerators that you go to and they have investors coming at your demo day, or you're either trying to get clients. There's some accelerators that all they do is they get you in front of clients, right? So you have to have that considerable traction that is going to land that customer or going to land that investor. And so I think the summary of everything is, know what is important for you, right? What are your goals? Kind of like what Demetrius was saying. Know what your goals are, and know what are the programmings that can lead you to get into your goals, and kind of focus on that so you don't get overwhelmed or too busy.
Yeah, I'll just sort of chime in on that. It's like sort of like there's a lot of things that you're asked to do in a lot of these accelerators. Truthfully, most founders pick and choose, right? They decide, what they're going to do and what they're not going to do within the accelerator, because there's not enough time really to do all of it, right? And so, like for us, like Erie is a great example of this. Like it's like, hey, we want to get to the executive team at Erie Insurance. That is the only thing that we want to do, right? Like all of this other stuff, meeting with other people. Yeah, like, thank you for the offer, but we came here to do one thing. And that's the only, if we walk away with this one thing, then we've succeeded. And so, now I can still go to the Erie Yacht Club and hang out. And, Tim DeCastro, a Fortune 500 CEO, knows me by name, and that works. And, and here's the other thing is like, and I think it's always going to be always about customers. Like, even if there is a fundraising component, it's like, when you sort of go to some of these accelerators, those relationships really do last over time. And so I think that's the other sort of component to some of these things is like building relationships such that you get immersed in the overall community. So like, running Captain now, we haven't gone to any accelerators, right? Well, we haven't because I've been to so many now that all of those connections already exist, right? And so, so it's really about relationship building, not just for the current startup that you're in, but for the long run, right? Building relationships that last over time.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and that requires a lot of follow up and engagement along the way, right? So not just during, but after. Do you have any tips and advice on, how to keep close contact with, post accelerator, all those new relationships that requires some work? What would your advice be to people about what to do post accelerator?
I think they do it for you. I mean, like every accelerator is trying to build out an alumni network because the best accelerators fundamentally understand, and Kelly, I think it would attest to this, is that they understand that really success for founders comes from interaction with other founders. And so over time, like I think I've got one tomorrow with RevTech Labs or QC FinTech that's like, an alumni call with all of their alumni from, multiple cohorts. And so, and you can choose to participate in those or not. And so, but they do that work for you. And I have other, previous accelerators that they actively reach out to me and say, hey, we need to catch up, or, whatever it might be. And so, so I think, you really don't have to actually do that much work to stay in touch, in my opinion, because they're always going to, 7 accelerators actually, because I forgot about Google. We went to Google's accelerator. We were in that first startup accelerator, Black Startup Accelerator cohort. But they're another one as an example. I mean, and like the big ones, and they'll send you like free stuff and like, swag from time to time, which is, I think, is always nice.
Yeah, I think, participating, being a part of those as they make those things available, putting some energy and effort into that is always a great thing to, continue to keep those relationships going, and being able to give back to other founders that you meet within the accelerator. I think that's also, that's what they're there for. So love that. I think, I would be interested to hear too, just with your experience in having been part of accelerators, what were some of the tough things that you encountered? Maybe think about like the very first one that you were ever a part of. Sometimes, that first experience during an accelerator, I know for me, it was like, there's so many opinions and some really strong, thoughts about your business and how you're approaching your business, that looking for like threads of things that are, coming at you because you're getting so much advice. Right. And tell me a little bit about like, what would you give to someone if they're going into their first one, like how to sort through, some of those types of things that could be a little bit challenging if it's your first experience as a part of an accelerator?
Yes, I'll answer that. I'll say a little bit from, but I'll continue with what Demetrius was saying about like after Accelerator, how do you stay engaged, right? Also your cohort members, right? Like those are folks that you need to stay engaged with. Like we have a WhatsApp group or stuff, right? Like that helps a long way. But your initial question is, I think for me, my first Accelerator is understanding that I am the subject matter expertise in what I'm doing, right? Like I'm here not necessarily to learn about my industry, but to learn about processes, to learn about what people have done that has worked before, and just some other standardized processes that work for some companies or not work for yours. So I think the biggest thing I had was back and forth saying, hey, this doesn't work. This doesn't apply to my company, knowing that this is what I wanted to do. And being headstrong about like this is what I really think that we need to do, right? You can be pulled so many directions, and Accelerator is like, if you're not really staunch in your belief of what your company is trying to do or the problem that you're solving and the method, it's easy to be pulled several ways, right? Like, I think some people look at accelerators at like pivot playgrounds, right? That's where a lot of the pivots happen. And some people think, hey, you just want to jump into a pivot. I think for Accelerator, you want to be very careful and mindful on the advice on that you get on your industry, unless it's an industry expert that the Accelerator brought from your particular place. There are program managers who've probably done some of it and who might not have done it. The idea is really just following the process and knowing that you know it, and don't feel like you have to listen and you have to follow everything. Like there's some level of independence, and that is that level of independence that truly drives founders.
Great. Demetrius, anything to add? Are you frozen? Hopefully we didn't lose him.
Let's see. Oh, I think we just did.
So we'll just keep moving along, Kella, but hopefully he'll hop back on. I think that it's really interesting to think about, the first experience versus maybe as you grew or learned, from those experiences. So having some advice for people on, their first approach to accelerators, I think is the goal that we want to be able to put out from this discussion. Going back to, just thinking through how you found or came across accelerators that you thought were a good fit for you. What was the best way to do that? What would you tell someone if they were, trying to identify an accelerator? Do they Google? Do they connect with someone? What's your best set of resources to tell someone about if they are trying to get into accelerators?
I think back then I used to use this website called let's see if I can write. Right. Okay. Well, I don't think welcome back. Yeah. So I don't think I can write it. But I don't think it gives me a place to comment. Right. Back then we used F6X and Gust, I believe. Mm-hmm. And that kind of just helped you see what was the schedules, right? So seeing which one was open, right? So it's because really it's like time, right? Like, okay, I think I'm at the point where I can use the help, and I think I have enough traction that I can get in. Which one is open, right? So I was really looking to find which ones were open for me. For most people, I'd say you got to start out with the vote awards. Going through the vote awards and getting that really gives you some upper hand in getting into a national accelerator, because then they look at you and say, hey, the local folks in their area gave them money, and even more important, undiluted money. So there might be something really interesting about this founder. So doing vote first is always important. And then they have the big ones. You have your YC, your Launchpad, 500 Startups, Techstars. Those ones, you just apply for those, right? Techstars has a particular vertical, so you can figure out which one you have, which one it is. But on the other ones, for me, I did some level of founder education, just reading about startups. That's something sometimes I think people can do better. in is your founder education and just like reading resources from the internet, because there's just so much of them. And as you read them, you start learning more about the accelerators and start learning about the strengths. But really, it's just Google and knowing which ones are the top ones. And if you want to go to one that's thematic, whichever one that follows your theme. I think, and their new stuff's coming out like on deck. So new ones are coming out, and they're new with newer verticals. So really, it's deciding if you just want to go to one that is broad or one that has a theme to it.
Great. Yeah. So Demetrius, thanks. Sorry, we had a little technical issue, but do you have any resources that you want to mention that really helped you find, how did you find the accelerators that you got into? Was it just like you were Googling? Did you have mentors that helped you kind of guide you in that? What would your advice be to folks if they're looking for accelerators?
Well, I think that the initial intent is always like money, right? You're always looking for money as a startup founder. And so part of the advantage of the accelerator is that they give you money, right? And so I don't think most, there's obviously platforms out there that you can use to look for accelerators. One of the simple things that we would do is we had a Google News alert for specific keywords, accelerator, whatever. And we would just sort of use that alert, and that would just come via Gmail, and then we would look at every single one as they came in to see exactly whether or not we wanted to apply. We applied when I started WeatherCheck. We applied every single cohort. Well, I don't know that we applied every single cohort, but we applied 4 different times to Y Combinator. And got in on our 4th time, so and what's interesting is I would generally sort of say that there isn't much sentiment analysis, I would say, in that process for the national accelerator, meaning that they're not really looking for traction or cues. It's really fun, at least I'm speaking for Y Combinator. It's sort of like, is the problem that you're solving interesting enough to the partners who are going to be reviewing your application? And to the extent that they're sort of interested. So we were working on something that was somewhat interesting, hey, why, and so what happened for us is that in that interview process, we got interviewed every single time we applied. Didn't know, in the very beginning of WeatherCheck, I had another co-founder. It wasn't Jermaine. I don't think even Kellen knows this. And so we applied together. We were in the early stages. We hadn't even decided on equity. We were sort of just starting, right? And we applied to YC, and we did the interview together. And then we applied again. Obviously, that co-founder and I separated, and it just didn't work out. But then got a new co-founder. Jermaine eventually comes on, and we get interviewed again, right? And so it didn't necessarily matter who the team was. The problem was interesting enough that the partners were consistently sort of like, huh. And I've found that just generally across most of the accelerators that we've applied to, that's generally the theme, is is your problem, the problem that you're solving, interesting enough to catch that reviewer's eye such that they elevate you to a stage where you can be interviewed. Right. And so that's where we spend a lot of time, energy, and effort, is trying to make sure that our copy and how we wrote the application was such that it was interesting to read. And so the normal way that we do that, and this is sort of a practical hack, is when you go to apply, when you're on one of these platforms, whether it's Gust or F6S or any of these, what you should do is you should log in, take every single question, every field that they ask you to fill out, and then put it in a Google Doc. And then when you put it in a Google Doc, make all your responses there first. And then you sort of go back and review what you've written before you make the submission. And then what you're doing is then when it's time to make your submission, then you copy and paste the finalized responses into the application. Because what you'll start to realize is if you're the guy that's or a gal that's I shouldn't use gender roles, but you go in and you like just hammer out the application and you click submit, then your chances of success are really, really low, because you really haven't perfected the art of storytelling through words, and you maybe aren't writing to be understood. Where you could use less words, you're probably using too many, sort of stuff like that. And so that's how you sort of craft the process. I think, every one of these referral or accelerated programs has a sort of referral mechanism, right? People are getting referred into the accelerator. And so that's always helpful, but I really don't think it's the number one thing. I hope we're going to talk about the Kelly and I said we were going to talk about this at some point, but like the YC, their new YC deal. So when I went through Y Combinator, it was like they took 7% of your company for, I believe it was $150,000. Well, now it's 7% of your company for $500,000. And twice a year they take 400 companies. And so it kind of gives you some sense of how much money they have. But and so for us, our sort of internal thesis was, like, we're about to do something very hard. We should only be focused on pursuing the best in class in terms of accelerators. And so that's why we just kept applying. Like we went to, there were lesser known accelerators and they were fine, but there was a distinctive difference once we got to YC. The sort of advice you were receiving. You weren't receiving empty advice. You were receiving advice from people who had built big companies already, who were from DoorDash. And so like, to be able to sit in a room with, Brian Chesky of Airbnb, or, Patrick, like literally from me to you, we're close by on the screen. So like, but Patrick Collison of Stripe, all of these sort of firms that are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Or eventually through Kella to meet Andy Dunn from Bonobos. It's sort of like all of these sort of interactions. And frankly, I think in the founder space, all these people are sort of our heroes. It's like, and so I think that's the benefit that you get, is that there's all these people who have already done what you're trying to do. If you sort of look around an accelerator and you look around and you say, who's built a really big company here? And there's no one, then it's sort of like, not want, but like
grain
like,
of salt.
Huh?
It's like grain of salt. Take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
You really have to sort of somewhat discount the advice, because at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is build companies that have outsized return. And I don't think I'm out of talking out of school amongst the Amplify cohort of sort of saying like, no, we're really trying to build things that are fast growing, that have outsized opportunity. And so that was a huge benefit for like YC, and like overall approach to applying is like, just keep doing it over and over again, and then have a system for how you apply, and you'll get into, and be solving a good problem and a good solution.
Yeah, I think that's terrific advice. I was going to ask, like, what did you think really helped you to stand apart, right? I mean, because a lot of people don't get in, and maybe you've gone through not getting in and being declined, right? And how that feels and how you overcome that. And it sounds like, yeah. So tell me about that. I mean, I'm sure folks want to hear like how
being declined. Yeah, cool. So, I mean, when Demetrius was doing his first application, I think I'd already got my third rejection. Or I was in my second. And so I think we talked around that. They were like, look, one of us has to get it, or both of us has to get it. Unfortunately, I didn't get it, but he did. I got it somewhere else. Well, it's kind of good for the community. We get to bring experience at two different accelerators back home. But yeah. So I interviewed with YC. I probably applied like at least 8 times between a couple companies, and I interviewed, I think, 2 or 3 times, 2 different companies. And I think the first rejection that was really hard for me was after doing the interview, right? So you're doing the interview, you're like, look, just getting into this stage is pretty hard. there was another Louisville founder at the first interview that I went. He wasn't based out of Louisville. He was in Boston. I think does stuff in machine learning and AI. So very smart guy, and we're there. And really excited. I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And we didn't get in, and it was tough. I asked for feedback, which they were kind enough to give. I think the biggest advice I'll say is it's almost impossible to change their mind once you're not getting in, right? Like, so while, you know, as a founder, you have that I can accomplish anything attitude and never take no for an answer. Know that more than likely it's going to be a no, but you know, you can try whatever you want, and just get the feedback, and then just be kind, just be nice. If you really want to stick to it, what you could do is you could add your interviewers to your update list, right? And so what happens, you just keep updating them as you go, and you can build a relationship with them as that go. Now, they might not be the same folks that interview in the next one, but at least, you know, you get to keep that relationship with them. That who knows what that could turn into, whether you're going to Accelerator or not. So yeah, so that was, I think that was it for me. And Vote Awards, I got in at my first company applied twice and didn't get in, but Melhaven applied once and got in. Vote Awards, I was just like, I just have to get back in. I needed to get myself into the community. So for those of you who are going to apply for Vote, right, like, and if you don't get in at the first try getting real involved in the community, get involved with Amplify the EIRs, myself, Natalia. Demetrius is very busy, so if you can get to talk to him. But yeah, really
Yes.
which we have here, which is myself, Natalia, meet folks from Vote, and just get really plugged into the community. I think on a local stage, I think that's a great way, if you get a rejection, to put yourself in the forefront. But yeah, that was kind of my experience with that.
Yeah, I'd also generally say it's like also like don't like for the top accelerators, there are rules, but they're not really hard and fast, right? So like as an example, you might think, hey, my application has passed the deadline. This is notorious for YC, right? My application's passed the deadline. I'm not going to submit. Go ahead and submit, like, because technically, like, there's still people actively reviewing them all the time. And so some people decide, like a lot of times in cohorts, what happens is the cohort may not work for their schedule. And so they'll push off to the next cohort. And so now there's a free spot. And so your application can still be reviewed. That's the other thing to think about, is that like it's not typically hard and fast, meaning that like if you sort of say, you know what, the timing's not right. Like I'm so excited that you guys accepted me, but timing's not right. Can I go, you know, the next time you offer the cohort? Like that's an option too. And so like it's just sort of a little bit of inside scoop on, you know, a lot of these accelerators are amenable to making changes to accommodate what the company needs. And that's the other sort of thing of like, from my perspective, the hallmark of a great accelerator is great accelerators are trying to benefit the company. They're not trying to push information onto you in a way that sort of, you know, like I've been through accelerators before, and it's like, you have to be here at this time to do this thing, and there's this laundry list of things. And sometimes with an absence of the awareness that, hey, this person's actually really running a company, you know? And so what you're really wanting to find is accelerators that are empathetic to the founder, that, hey, it's hard to build this thing. And yes, like, the work of the business is actually always going to be more important than the class, right? Or the thing. And so, you know, I think some of it's about, you know, some of those classes are really more about camaraderie than they are about the information that you're gathering from said speaker. But, you know, so I would say, like, just remember, like, there really aren't that many rules as it relates to accelerators. So, you know, don't be afraid to apply or continue applying, and like sort of get over the fear of rejection. You're going to get rejected. I had a few, and in some ways, some of the accelerators are, I don't know what the right word is, but it's sort of like they're always recruiting startups. And so like you sometimes, as you sort of become a known commodity in the startup community, nationally and internationally, people will invite you to their accelerator, right? And so and once that invitation comes, and so then you have to apply, right? And once you apply, and then they send you a rejection email, and I say, well, you invited me. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so like that gets annoying. And so eventually we got to the place where if an invitation would come, we wouldn't entertain it at all. Right? If you don't have if the accelerator doesn't have the time to get to know the company well enough before they make the invitation, then I don't really have the time to come to your accelerator. And so that's sort of how you can think about, you know, the sort of effort, and all this has to do with this sort of level of empathy to understand. Okay, well, what's the founder having to do? Well, if they're going to spend time preparing for your accelerator, preparing your application, then you know, you probably need to have some empathy to the fact that they didn't do something else in the business because they were sort of applying to come to your thing. So that's why I think like accelerators, I think Kelly mentioned this, they give you feedback is so valuable, right? A willingness to sort of say, hey, here's what we didn't like, or those are the good ones.
Yeah. To add to what you were saying about it not being hard and fast, like I think in the situation that I had, right, like you know, there's all this rumor that the top accelerators or their accelerators are not going to invite you or are not going to go out of their ways and recruit you. There was a accelerator, it was a top one, like they don't recruit you, they don't, but they came out and they recruited us, right? And for me, like it was saying, you can choose your rules, and the top ones, they understand that. And mine, I said, look, if we're not fast tracked to the final, to like the last two interviews, I'm not even going to apply, you know. And but that came from, we had some traction, we just came out of a top accelerator, and it's okay to feel that, you know, feel your value, right? Like it's okay, you should, you know, you don't get that all the time. As a founder, you're always feeling like you have to answer to someone or you need someone to do something. So there are times where you feel like the ball is in your court, you should enjoy it, right? And you can make demands. And so that was ours, right? Like, so Fast Ride, they said, okay, well, you guys are going to get in, just fill the application, do that. We got it. We got in. Now it ended up not working out, but it did show that, look, it's not rigid, right? Like if they really want you, they're going to go for you, and you have the opportunity to say, hey, this is what I want. I think at that point we're being courted by another accelerator, and we told them, we're like, if we're going to do it, you're going to allow us 10 votes, and it'll be this, and it'll be a different equity, right? So it really depends on where you are. And at least that was our situation, right? But it's not common. But what I'm saying is, it's not uncommon that they change rules or that you ask the rules to fit where you are, right? Like we had traction, we were going through a pilot. I didn't want to waste my time filling applications if I know it wasn't going to get to a seat.
Yeah, that's really great advice, because it does, you know, it's okay to be picky. And, you know, I think just knowing that if you don't get accepted, maybe it wasn't the right fit. And there's a question in the comments here from Nick asking about, and I think we addressed this a little bit, but the question is, should founders, well, Kiana's putting it up for us, that are just getting into the world of accelerators, focus on accelerators that are industry specific? And I think, Demetrius, you spoke on this a little bit. Definitely that helps, right? I mean, and, you know, I think there's a lot to learn, you know, understanding like cross industry, what makes the most sense. I mean, you know, you were looking at the insurance space for WeatherCheck. You know, there's a lot of crossover in terms of the industry and knowing who your customers can be. And I mean, the best thing that can come out of the accelerator experience is absolutely those those first customers and growing, you know, new distribution channels for your business. But as far as just trying to target accelerators, how would you guide Nick on this question?
You know, I mean, the best accelerators in the world are not industry specific. I mean, I would generally say like if this is sort of like a larger sort of like business development strategy for you. Like, how am I going to grow or fund the company over time? For us in the early days of WeatherCheck, it was like, oh, we had an accelerator-based strategy, which was like we're applying to a lot of accelerators to help grow the business. Now, the way we picked those was not by industry, it was really by function. What could this accelerator do for us? Right. And so this accelerator right here can give us this customer. Right. So it didn't really matter that it was an insurtech accelerator or a fintech accelerator we really sort of aligned the need of the business, right, to the accelerator itself, and then made our application based upon that need. So when we went to QC FinTech, it was about understanding financial technology in the context of insurance, right? And we had some milestones associated with that. And when we went to BCP Tech, yes, it is a broker accelerator, but it was because the business was interested in insurance agents and brokers at the time, right? And so it really is always going to be correlated to the function that you're trying to achieve in the business. And I would say that's the right way to do it so that you ensure that you get out what you need to get out. See, that accelerator needs something from you, right? They need you to show up. They need this all-star company that everybody can get excited about in their community so that people give them more money and da. And so that's what you're giving up as a founder when you go to one of these accelerators. You're sort of getting kind of used a little bit, right? But the benefit has to be mutual. And you're the only person who can sort of guarantee that you get what it is that you need, right? And frankly, in some ways, you have to be almost emphatic about it. That, hey, I'm going to get what my company needs out of this thing, right? Come hell or high water. And so that's sort of was always our lens, was like getting what the company needed.
What and Kelly, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and it's like, so with what he said, right? There's a strategy that I always tell, especially if you're from like a Midwestern city, if you didn't go to one of the big schools, if you didn't have this, is raising money is not easy, right? It's doable. But one of the cheat codes that I say is just your accelerator based raising funds, right? So it's not necessarily about the industry at that first stage, right? You might be going to a lower tier accelerator, right? Like, but I say apply to everyone, the top ones, the tier ones, the second tiers. But the issue is the thing is you might not get into the first tier, right? When you really need money, you really need all of that. That's why you have to go to the smaller ones, right? So those ones write $50K to $100K checks. You get into those ones, right? And then as you start, if you really need something that is specific to your industry, you can go. In my case, I needed someone specific to I needed to go to a hardware accelerator first, right? I went through a Vote, and Vote was really, I needed the money, right? Like, there was some stuff I learned, but I really was ridiculously obsessive about learning what it is to be a founder, right? So by the time I came, I knew a lot. I knew a lot, right? And so Vote was really about money and the connections and then the help in the city. And when I was going to Highway 1 was about expertise in hardware. I was a hardware CEO, and I'm not an engineer, right? So it was sensible, and it made complete sense for me to go there and for me to learn, right? So I was learning how to solder. Like, I'd never soldered circuits before. I was learning how circuits work. I was learning how to 3D print stuff. I was out in the field where stuff would break, and I'm working on it myself, debugging stuff on firmware databases, right? So these were stuff that I learned, and because I needed to learn that, not to be the one doing it in my company, but as a CEO of a hardware startup, I'm going to have conversations with highly technical investors, right? I don't have to say, "Hello, my CTO has to come in and speak," or he doesn't always have to speak. I have to show some level of understanding of hardware fundamentals or circuit fundamentals or anything like that, or whether it's cost of goods or the lingo that is spoken, because that's different from if it's software. So in that case, like I needed to go to a specific one. But like Demetrius said, right, like the best accelerators are not specific, right? They might be a couple really good ones that are specific, like Techstars might have their little specific ones. But the top two are probably not, right? On Deck is coming up. They're doing that with some team, but I think theirs is not just industry specific; it's a little bit more around themes. But really, I think I'll end it with the best ones are not industry specific. If you think you need an industry specific need, then you go for that.
Great. What we have about 10 minutes left. I think it'd be interesting just for each of you to share too, like what's the best success that's come out of the accelerator? Like if you had one story to tell, like this is what happened during this experience that propelled us, or we learned, something from it, what would it be?
Man, okay, I say this one because this is so big for me. Okay, one of it is like, so I enjoy storytelling, and my storytelling game just upped. Like going through 500 startups. Like I felt like a different person in terms of learning how to tell stories concise, how to be clear, how to make it imaginative, how to make sure that when I tell my stories, in your mind, you're filling the gaps, right? Like I'm getting your brain thinking. It's like watching a movie and then you're anticipating what is happening and you're saying, hey, well, this could be this could be a simple. That's how when I tell a story, that's how I want the people to feel. And that's what I came out of. That's what I came out of it as a personal skill. In terms of my startup, we saw growth of our app that we hadn't seen before. And that's because we were not focused on onboarding. We weren't focusing on, on that day 7, day 14 metrics. We were just like a month, right? How many new users this month? How many people downloaded it? But when you're able, so what we learned was really how to segment the user onboard, either from when them learning about it to them getting onboarded, for them using it, to them going back to them and seeing that they're using it in day 14 and at day 30, right? So that was one thing we learned. That process helped us. We increased our retention by about 60%, and we increased new user growth by 40% month over month for about 3 months. It was at a difficult period too, because hardware, we didn't get a lot of funding coming out, and I had to keep our engineers happy. And we weren't see, for us to see growth in hardware is money and some other things. But our engineers were able to stay happy and stay engaged because they were seeing growth in something else, which was our software, right? And so you're seeing like, okay, well, what we're doing is working out. Because my journey in Millhaven was just like survive, right? And keep on going and have a focus. And seeing success in that really helped our focus.
Yeah.
Okay, what great thing came out of Accelerators? I really think obviously the money, right? Like we raised a lot of money thereafter. I mean, millions of dollars, and so that's always good. I also think for us, I believe we're still the first, we're still the only company from Kentucky ever accepted into Y Combinator. And so that comes with a level of prestige and cachet that has been helpful over the years since. So we went through in winter 2019. And, frankly, the byproduct is also that we now have a level of connection in the Bay Area that is, I would say, outsized in terms of our ability to sort of do new things, right? So, I can't say that WeatherCheck was a $1 billion success. It was a few $1 million success, and it's still an ongoing concern with a lot of users. But our ability to then sort of kick off Captain sort of added to the overall story, right? And so, our ability to just sort of go into markets, and our first check that was written into Captain was a YC founder, who wrote us a $25,000 check and said, "Hey, I believe in what you're doing. I understand exactly why you're moving and pivoting and changing." Right. And so we're still in the same category, but just doing something a little bit different. And so in a lot of ways, I think those are the outsides. I think the relationships are by far and away the biggest sort of benefit. The sheer number of people. I always quote, we're in Louisville, so I quote Michael Boone, who was our first investor in WeatherCheck. We actually met him on the Vote Awards demo day night. And he wasn't there for us. He was there for other people. And I think the story goes that I walked up to him and said, "I hear you're the guy that's giving out all the money." And but he says, at the end of the day, Demetrius, this $100,000 really isn't about building out the product. It's really about you going and making the world smaller. And so that initial investment really went a long way. And really, that's what accelerators are about. Can you make the world smaller in 8 to 12 weeks, such that your business can grow faster because there's more relationship, there's more context, there's a deeper view. I would say that, like, the other thing, like, this wasn't your question, but it's sort of like you should prepare for rigor, right? Like, there's an extreme degree of rigor during that 12 to 16 weeks. Some of them are a little bit longer than that. But I think Jermaine and I were certainly working from 8 to 9, 8 to 8, typically every single day, 6 days a week. And then sometimes he'd fly home on the weekend and fly right back. And it's just sort of a crazy thing. And so the level of sacrifice that comes from Accelerator is significant. If you're a person who has a family, as an example, and I always want to hit on this, like, because there are people, I have a family, I have a wife and a daughter. And when we got into YC, our daughter was only 6 months old. And they only came to San Francisco one time. For that entire 3-month period, I say the entire time. And those are the sort of sacrifices that you end up having to make. But the byproduct is that, now in this scenario, when we started Captain, like, fundraising was a lot easier, right? And a lot larger, because now you're known, right? And I would tell all of you that, like, who are listening, like, you're never going to get away from the Bay Area. You're never going to get away from New York. And maybe a consideration is the secondary markets are like Miami and Austin, right? And maybe LA.
Don't let them hear you call Miami secondary.
Listen, no, they'll be upset about that. But look, everybody knows Miami's on the come up. But at the end of the day, there's still a sandhill road, and I'm not exactly sure where to find that in Miami just yet. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, Kelly love, like, everybody's on PR right now because I'm not supposed to say negative things. But I would sort of say, at the end of the day, and Jen's probably like, "Demetrius, shut up." But at the end of the day, like, that's why you want to be looking to these tier 1 accelerators, because they do have the deepest level of connection to larger and larger pools of capital, such that you can continue to grow. The rigor is high, right? Like, you're competing with everybody in the world, but it's a really great thought exercise for you as a founder to go through, to understand who else is applying, who else is in my category, what am I up against? Frankly, our startup got better because we went through that exercise. Right? Because we realized, we're not as good as what we thought we were, right? Like, we could really improve, or being asked some really hard, tough questions from people you respect, right? Like, when Paul Graham calls you out, you're sort of like, whew, okay, maybe I need to rethink what I'm doing. And so, yeah, you'll benefit from an accelerator so much. We did. And I say that as a person who now has a new company that hasn't gone through an accelerator. But if you're sort of a first time, especially if you're a first time founder, that's a tool that you need in your tool belt, is an accelerator that can help you sort of navigate relationships, get introductions, all that great stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you both so much. I mean, this has just been, I mean, you can see in the comments, everyone's loving some of the expertise and just the experience. I think that, you know, to be able to get in and then go through, like you said, the sacrifice that it takes. I mean, that's your family, your you know, personal life balance. Sometimes your team, if you have a team of people, a co-founder, you know, bringing them along during that process sometimes can be challenging too. So all of this has just been incredibly helpful. I think that particularly any first-time founders out there that you know, are considering accelerators and trying to figure it out and preparing themselves. Hopefully they got a lot of good information today. I mean, we have to get uncomfortable to grow, right? So I think that this has been incredibly helpful for everyone. I continue to see just a lot of kudos to you two in the comments here. And at Amplify Louisville, we just appreciate so much that you're willing to kind of come back and give this experience and share these experiences with the community. I mean, that means so much to us. So thank you so much for your time today. And I think beyond this, we did record the session, so we'll be publishing that and sharing it with the broader community too.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kiana Baker, for your help in producing this.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Stay warm.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.